This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Trump in West Virginia rallying his base. I mean, that's a state he won with nearly 70% of the vote. So popular is Trump in West Virginia that Governor Jim Justice announced that he was changing his registration from Democrat, conservative Democrat businessman, to Republican yesterday. Trump, of course, thanked him for that, said it's an indication of his agenda not being bound by left or right. And then he went on to spend some time talking about the Russian collusion investigation, both mainly from the kind of the Democrats' jawboning of it, less so than on the particulars. But this against the backdrop of Bob Mueller impaneling a grand jury yesterday, and frankly moving this into the criminal prosecution phase, because that's what grand juries are for. And here's Trump on Russia.
But Governor Justice did something else. The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics. That's all it is. It just makes them feel better when they have nothing else to talk about. What the prosecutors should be looking at are Hillary Clinton's 33,000 deleted emails.
Yeah. And
the shouting lock her up again.
Lock her up. Yeah. The Huntington, West Virginia faithful seem to like that. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Gregg, Jarrett, Fox News Channel anchor, and an attorney himself. Gregg, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, nice to be with you.
So what's your take on the judiciousness of Trump continuing to kind of prosecute the Russian collusion case as a total fabrication while Mueller moves forward with sort of due speed, but certainly moving into deeper water as it pertains to the Trump administration?
Well, the use of a grand jury raises a lot of red flags. I mean, first of all, it is utterly anathema to democracy. It's a secret star chamber. Defense attorneys are not allowed to be there. The grand jurors are spoon-fed incriminating evidence by the prosecution, nothing exculpatory. There's nobody there to cross-examine or challenge the witnesses or test the credibility of the evidence. It was truly one of the great mistakes that the Founding Fathers made in crafting the Fifth Amendment. And in fact, it was in widespread use back in the 1700s, dating all the way back to the 12th century. But there are only two countries in the world who still use a grand jury, the United States and Liberia. And that should tell you something, that we've come to realize that grand juries are a charade. They bear no resemblance to justice, and they're abusive. So I worry about that. I also worry that Robert Mueller, the special counsel, who should have disqualified himself under the special counsel law, has selected Washington, D.C., for the grand jury, where Donald Trump received 4% of the vote and Hillary Clinton 93% of the vote. I dare say there's probably not a single juror on that grand jury that likes Donald Trump. So there's that aspect of the unfairness. So we'll have to wait and see.
But okay. I mean, I take your points, and we can have an interesting discussion about the rule of law and the role of grand juries. But and to your point, this is why what's the cliche about grand juries? A prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich because of grand juries. But the problem is that that doesn't save the Trump administration and potential targets for this impaneled grand jury. And so moving forward, what would your advice and counsel be for President Trump now that Mueller clearly has to have at least some targets in his sight?
Well, be full and forthcoming and cooperative, and I still view the law as favoring Donald Trump and those surrounding him, save and except perhaps Michael Flynn. It's a little unclear about that. But, for example, the grand jury is apparently interviewing people and examining evidence with respect to Donald Trump Jr.'s now infamous meeting with a Russian lawyer. Well, there's nothing illegal about that. It's perfectly protected by the First Amendment. It's not a crime to speak with a Russian. And in fact, when Nancy Pelosi held a news conference, said it's clearly a violation of the election laws. It's clearly not, and she's wrong. If you just go to the Federal Election Commission's website, it specifically says, and it cites the law, that foreign nationals are entitled to volunteer their services and information in campaigns in America. They just can't contribute money. So, as for collusion, there is no such thing as collusion except in antitrust law, not in political campaigns. Maybe there should be, but there isn't. Right. So the law, I still continue to ask the question, so what law has been violated? We'll wait and see.
So the grand jury has convened, and they're going to subpoena documents and testimony from people in that meeting. That means Donald Trump Jr. is probably going to have to appear before the grand jury. Do you think President Trump will ever have to appear before the grand jury, since he allegedly crafted a statement that Donald Trump Jr., that he wanted him to release in regards to that meeting? Yeah,
I doubt. I mean, there's nothing criminal about crafting an explanatory email or memo. There's nothing wrong with that. He wasn't there at the meeting. He wasn't a participant, so I doubt he would be subpoenaed to testify on that particular subject. Now, it's also been widely reported that Mueller is looking at obstruction of justice in the firing of James Comey.
Right.
And so it's possible that the president could be questioned about that. But you still have to look at the law of obstruction of justice. It requires a threat of bribe or a lie. And not even James Comey alleges those three things. So where is obstruction? The president is allowed to fire anybody in the executive branch for a reason or no reason at all. So, again, where's the crime? And Mueller has gone far afield from his express directive when he was retained. And I think the president, if Mueller goes into the direction of digging through the president's and his family's finances, the president could object to that. His lawyers could go to a federal judge and say, wait a minute, you have to show just cause for this. You just can't engage in a widespread fishing expedition. And he would have a good shot at a judge limiting Mueller.
And your restraint is appropriate, too, including all of the speculation about the grand jury. We don't know who's even being looked at in this context. We don't know who's going to testify. We don't know who's a target. We have no idea.
Right, and grand juries are sometimes simply a vehicle for subpoenaing witnesses and documents and compelling testimony.
Right.
So it's not, one shouldn't automatically assume it is there for indictment only. But again, even the states throughout the United States have moved away from the grand jury system, and they've changed their state constitutions to something else. It's called a preliminary hearing, where the defense can be present, where a judge, instead of a stacked grand jury, decides probable cause sufficient to bring a case. So, I'm always skeptical of grand juries. They are anathema to democracy, and the fact that they're secret always worries me.
Now, on the other side, you've got a good piece by Kim Strassel again. She's been really killing it lately, in my opinion. The Scandal That Matters, and she's talking about Debbie Wasserman Schultz's IT team. And she writes, litany of court documents accuse them of bankruptcy fraud, life insurance fraud, tax fraud, and extortion. Brother ran up more than $1 million in debts on a failed car dealership. The brother of Awan's brother, the principal of this whole crime family. He somehow operated while he was working full-time on the Hill, a failed car dealership. He was working full-time. She goes on to say, even if this never adds up to a spy thriller, it outranks most of the media's other obsessions. The government, under the inattentive care of Democrats, may have been bilked for ages by a man the FBI has alleged to be a fraudster. That's the same government Democrats say are qualified to run your health care, reform your children's schools, protect the environment, and so forth. And also there's suggestions that maybe, again, I don't know, maybe because he had access to sensitive information, maybe he was selling sensitive government information that negatively impacted our national security interests even. What about the Wasserman Schultz IT and Democrats, because they work for 30 of them, the Democrats IT team, where there have been arrests made and specific charges alleged under the criminal code, and the relative lack of interest from the D.C. press corps on this topic?
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. Not much attention in the first 4 days that the story broke. None of the network evening newscasts even mentioned it, which is pretty remarkable. Why would Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who for a long time was head of the DNC, why would she keep this IT guy on her payroll? You and I are paying for it, taxpayers, even months after he was banned from congressional computers and was a suspect in an ongoing investigation. Yet she maintained him on the payroll. Why? Mm-hmm. And why did she appear to obstruct the investigation by the feds and the Capitol Police? She's caught on tape in a committee hearing threatening the head of the Capitol Police. And she better get herself a good defense attorney, because that could be construed as a crime. And so, these are people, this whole group of people, Iman Awan and his family, they were accessing, without permission from members of Congress, the House Intelligence and Foreign Affairs Committee sensitive government documents, many of which were classified. They were downloading it to remote servers and up to the cloud. So what were they doing with this material? Were they peddling it to WikiLeaks? We just don't know. The investigation has really begun.
And it's so strange because she shielded him up until the end, and other congressional members used him as well to the tune of, $4 million.
And also, one other man, the wife flees the country back to, I think, Qatar or maybe it was Pakistan, but back to the Middle East.
Right. The whole family fled back to Pakistan. He gets on the phone to the credit union, pretends to be her in an attempt, apparently, at a fraudulent bank loan, gets it. I mean, I guess he has a good woman's voice. Hello. And sends it off to Pakistan. Well, that's a pretty clear evidence of bank fraud and perhaps several other crimes. And then he is caught at Dulles Airport just about to leave for Pakistan when he's arrested. And he tried to retrieve all of these hard drives and computer disks that he had smashed and left behind in his haste. So all of it is very suspicious.
Those Democrats like to throw down the hammer, whether it's a hard drive or cell phones.
Yeah, that's their
Hillary,
weapon
I think
of choice.
That's a Hillary Clinton trick. A lot of smashed cell phones and hard drives and destroyed SIMs.
For a $25 contribution to the DNC, you get one that's autographed. Gregg Jarrett, Fox News Channel anchor, former attorney. Well, I don't know if you're keeping your license current.
I do keep my license.
All right, so he's not a former attorney, he's an attorney.
Yeah, Dan, get
God's
it right.
sakes. All right, Gregg, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right, Dan and Amy, take care.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.